Hey guys, EvanNova95 here, and welcome to another installment of Versus Series Q&A, the series where I answer your questions and criticisms relating to the latest episodes of Star Wars Versus series. Today we will be discussing your thoughts on Season 7, Episodes 9 and 10, Anakin Skywalker versus Jaina Solo Fel. However, before we jump into hyperspace, I just want to take a moment to thank you all for the extremely positive feedback from these videos. I know it was frustrating to have all this build-up only for a hardware crash to postpone production, but you guys stuck with me, and for that, I am immensely grateful. Not to mention, the extra time did give me the opportunity to correct some editing mistakes in order to give you what I thought was ultimately the superior product. It was a pain in the ass to be sure, but not one without a silver lining. As for the videos themselves, my main goal was to take what elements worked best in Mace vs. Kaitis and refine them. Not so much in terms of length, though I will be trying to work on that, but more so the blending of storytelling and combative description. I didn't just want to make people understand which of these Jedi was stronger, I wanted them to understand who they were as characters, as well as clear up some of the misconceptions fans tend to have when it comes to their high-end feats and abilities. Did I succeed? Well, I'll leave that up to you. We have a handful of questions to get through, so let's not waste any more time. Here are my responses to you on the duology of Anakin Skywalker versus Jaina Solo Fel. Our first two questions come from Saber King, and he asks, what made you want to bring Anakin back into the Versus series, while also bringing back Jaina Solo Fel? Similarly to when my buddy Jensarai1 brought back Yoda for his Malak video, my decision to bring back Anakin Skywalker into the series was motivated by a desire to make amends. Though I never covered him directly, I spent years ragging on Anakin's combative abilities in various other videos. And while I do still stand by several of my criticisms, I realize now that many of my points were incredibly disingenuous and, frankly, disrespectful to the character. He's not perfect, but he is a lot more capable than I initially gave him credit for, and I wanted to use this match as a way of presenting my new perspectives. As for Jaina Solo Fel, the reasons for her inclusion are a bit more streamlined. I liked the idea of a Skywalker versus Solo match, and given that Anakin and Jaina have so many overarching personality and developmental traits, the match just seemed right to me. Furthermore, despite being literally one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars, I haven't featured Jaina in a Versus match in 7 years. So, needless to say, her breakdown was in serious need of an update. Moving to Saber's next question we have, you brought up Boba Fett in Jaina's breakdowns. Has it crossed your mind on having him show up in a non-Force user matchup, like Jango Fett vs. Pre Vizsla, especially with the Book of Boba Fett coming? While I wouldn't really consider myself a hardcore Boba Fett fan, I'm not unwilling to use him in a match someday. It's really just a matter of finding a suitable opponent and sorting through the literal mindfuck that is Boba Fett's combative feats, as he is easily one of the most inconsistent combatants in the entire Star Wars setting, with the range of his scaling being anywhere from Council level to Stormtrooper level depending on your interpretation of the lore. Our next set of questions comes from Center of Star, who asks, so now that you have an updated view of Anakin, where do you place him on the tier list? From the looks of it, it looks like Anakin is tier 1 along with Jaina. Well, Star, looks are all well and good, but if Luke's first interactions with Yoda in Empire has taught us anything, it is that looks can often be deceiving. Although my opinions of Anakin Skywalker's combative abilities have definitely improved from what they once were, I still can't in good conscience place him in the tier 1 category like I do with Jaina. He is a high tier 2. In fact, I'd say he's about as high of a tier 2 as you could possibly be without actually leveling up. But the sad fact of the matter is he's simply not balanced. Now, we can throw around feats and equations till we're as blue in the face as a Chagrian, but for me, the definitive factor that separates a Tier 2 combatant from a Tier 1 combatant is how completely they have mastered themselves. Martial skill, force ability, tactical prowess. Those are the three very broad pillars I use to judge a character's tier. Anakin has the martial skills and force ability of a Tier 1, no question, but when it comes to tactical prowess, he's sadly lacking. He's not stupid, but like I said in the video, he's a self-admitted hothead who frequently overestimates his own abilities and fails to play the field like he should. As ironic as it may sound, think of the difference between Tier 2 and Tier 1 as the difference between Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader. While I do think Vader edges out Anakin as a martial artist and, at least in a base-to-base sense, surpasses him in force power, the two are very much in the same league, both having attained near perfect technical mastery of their physical and ethereal attributes. The difference is that unlike Anakin, Vader has learned the lessons of his failures and knows that a fight is about more than who's inherently stronger. That deconstructing a foe's psyche and bolstering it with meticulous planning can be just as dangerous as the weapon you hold. Basically what I'm getting at is that tiers 2 and 1, to me, are ultimately differentiated by a character's level of balance. Jaina has attained this, Anakin has not, and that's why I have him at tier 2. Moving on, we have Star's second question, which is Obi-Wan going to make a return to this Versus series? This is then followed up by a recommendation to pit him against Kyle Katarn in keeping with this season's theme of NJO characters versus other eras. Unfortunately, Star, at the moment, I do not have any plans to bring Kenobi into this season. I do have every intention to bring him back next season, though, and I've even toyed around with the idea of having him be the basis for another mini-marathon like I did with Darth Malgus. As for who to pit Obi against, well, Kyle Katarn is a very popular request, and I'm totally up for it. Though I will say that I have also given thought to doing Kenobi versus an incarnation of Luke, if you can believe it. I know it's a bit more one-sided, but I just love the storytelling potential that match has, but we'll cross that hyperspace lane when we come to it. Moving into Star's third question, we have, what are your thoughts on the upcoming series Kenobi? I'd say I'm curious, but it's still gonna be a net neutral until I at least see a trailer. No matter what, Disney Star Wars is always gonna be blah to me, since even if the show is serviceable, it's still gonna have the shade of the sequel trilogy weighing it down. It is pretty hype to see Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen come back, but all the fan service in the universe won't mean jack shit unless you give a good story to back it up. I'm not saying it doesn't have potential to be good. Just like The Mandalorian, I'm sure there will be episodes that I find both entertaining and engaging. It's just that I'm always going to be aware of what could have been. Also, and I know this hasn't been technically confirmed, but the idea of Obi-Wan Kenobi having another fight with Darth Vader before New Hope sounds interesting on paper, but again, there has to be story significance to it rather than just rule of cool. If you're going to make a sequel to the Mustafar duel, which is easily one of the most story-driven fights in the entire franchise, make it an organic part of the show's narrative. Don't just shoehorn it in because it's neat. Moving into Star's last question, he asks, have you thought about making shorter videos while working on longer verses? Oh yes, and once I get a more stable schedule, I will definitely try to make that happen as best I can. Next up, we have Wes Bradley Tobner, who asked 3 questions. However, I'm going to be only answering 2 since the first one revolves around the Anakin's potential versus Luke's potential discussion I hinted at in the match, and I don't want to give my opinions on that until I actually make the video. Hope you don't mind. Anyway, Wes asks, if Jaina Solo Fel during Crucible ran 2 gauntlets, the Grandmaster Gauntlet and the Battlemaster Gauntlet, both of which were made in your ranking videos, how far do you think she'd make it in each gauntlet? I would say she would clear the Battlemaster Gauntlet and get about 85% of the way through the Grandmaster Gauntlet. Lord Hoth and the Hero of Tython would give Jaina respectable fights, but neither of them really have the force punch to take the Sword of the Jedi down, in my opinion. As for Kyle Katarn versus Jaina Solo, while that would be a spectacular fight to witness, I do think it would just be an elongated version of Kyle's fight with Darth Caedus. Jaina is a much more honorable fighter than her brother, so she probably wouldn't go for the cheater's win like he did, but like with Caedus, Solo is at least just as skilled of a swordsman as Kyle is, and has the added benefits of youth, and, in my opinion, a stronger connection to the Force, giving her the win. Again, a great fight, but not one she would lose. As for the Grandmasters, Jaina Solo still gets pretty far here, but not quite all the way. Nomi Sunrider's clerical abilities might give Jaina pause, but her physical and martial talents aren't even in the same solar system, so she'd lose pretty handily. Cole Skywalker is a bit tricky because we don't actually know the scope of his strength, but I'll save my dive into him for my next video, shameless plug. Satele Shan is definitely comparable to Jaina Solo in terms of just raw force power, but again, like with Nomi, I don't think her saber skills are on the same level. Shan would do far better against Jaina than Nomi would, no question, but if a pre-prime Darth Malgus can handily outfence her, I really see no reason why Jaina couldn't do the same. All that being said, I do not believe that Jaina Solo could defeat either Yoda or Luke Skywalker. Even if we take the most literal interpretation of Luke's praise for his niece as the combat equal of anyone in the Order, to mean that Jaina possessed equal saber skill to her uncle, like I also said in her Force breakdown, Jaina has outright admitted that her uncle was more powerful than her. And that's during the time frame of the Fate of the Jedi series, so you can't even make the power creep argument. Add on the fact that Yoda and Luke are just so much more experienced than Jaina, and I just can't see her winning. Still, she would be a definite obstacle for them. Up next from Wes, we have a joke question that reads, how many The Rise of Skywalker Rays would it take to beat Crucible Jaina Solo Fel? No external amps, battle meditation from Luke for Jaina, all the Jedi spirits for Rey, and no plot armor or Disney interference. A few hundred might be a decent warm-up. Our next question comes from Daryl Franklin Jr., who asks, did the new Jedi Order continue to use the 3 Rings of Defense up to the Legacy series, or did it become as obsolete as Makashi did by the time of the Perpetual Trilogy? Well, there's no official source on this, but I would venture a guess that by the time of Legacy, the 3 Rings of Defense weren't so much obsoleted as they were reassigned. While the style did become the central basis for many of the NJO's senior members, that was mainly because it took a long time for the NJO to establish a consistent training regimen, as well as to rediscover the 7 classical forms used by the previous order. Furthermore, as the 3 rings were explicitly depicted as a simplistic tutorial style designed to introduce students to the principles of lightsaber combat, it's likely that they were just folded into the general curriculum of the Jedi Academy alongside Shi-Cho when more refined and efficient fighting styles became available. This would actually make a lot of sense since the fighting styles of the Legacy-era Jedi appear to resemble the sequences of the Clone Wars-era Jedi much more so than the early NJO era. Our last questions come from Random Revenite, who had 2 inquiries, the first being, if the Old Republic fought the Galactic Republic, who would end up winning? That's actually a really tricky one to answer since it entirely depends on which time frame for each era we are talking about. Remember, the Rise of the Empire/Galactic Republic era is generally defined as any time between 1000 BBY and 0 BBY, whereas the Old Republic era is generally defined as any time between 25,000 BBY and 1000 BBY. That's quite a substantial differential. This makes scaling either era extremely flimsy since they vary wildly in capability from century to century. For example, if you were to pit the Galactic Republic during the time frame of the Clone Wars, where they had a massive clone and Jedi army outfitted with the best military hardware available, against the Old Republic during the time frame of the Great Hyperspace War, where they'd barely invented intersystem travel and lightsabers had to be hooked into power packs, the Old Republic would get absolutely annihilated. In contrast, if you were to pit the Old Republic during the SWTOR time frame, where the Jedi and Republic lived and breathed warfare to the point it became a common facet of life, against the Galactic Republic post-Ruusan reformations, where the Jedi were fewer in number and had no standing army to back them up, the Galactic Republic would get stomped. Due to all these variables and timeline shenanigans, there really is no way to say objectively which era of the Republic was stronger without getting into headcanon territory, so for now, all I'll say is both. Shifting into Revanite's last question, we have, who do you think is easier to get a more concrete picture of their power levels, Revan or Mitra Surik? Malik. No, but in all seriousness, Mitra's strength fluctuates quite a bit, but she's far more consistent than Revan, who seems only to be as strong or as weak as the writers need him to be for the plot, whether it makes sense or not. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this installment of Versus Series Q&A. I know this was an incredibly short video, but there were a lot of repeat questions this time around, and I wanted to devote my energies mainly to the Cole Skywalker script, but I hope you enjoyed nonetheless. As always, please leave your thoughts and questions in the comments section below. May the Force be with you, stay safe, and I'll see you guys later.